Hey everyone, my name is Ashley with HTX Sports Tech, one of the co-founders of HTX Sports Tech. I also have my partner as well, Nate Thompson, that's going to be joining here on our panel. He's also co-founder of HTX Sports Tech. And I wanted to introduce some of our panelists who we are excited about. Happy to have them here with us to talk about, sports, esports, investment landscape, all of these exciting things, and just the opportunities that's out here in the ecosystem, but then also opportunities that are in the city of Houston as well too. And so, really excited about doing this type of panel for the Houston Tech Rodeo. And so, without further ado, I want to jump into it, and I want to introduce you to Sandra Lopez, who is the VP General Manager of Intel Sports. And we also have Tim Fong, who's a partner at Intersect Venture Capital, Intersect VC. And then we also have Rohn, who is a co-founder of SportsTechX. And so, like I said, I want to take a second to introduce everyone to them first. And I'll be moderating this panel with my partner as well as a really good friend, Nate Thompson. And let's kick this thing off. So, Nate, do you want to throw out? I want to get deep, and I want to do a deep dive into it. So, coming out the gate hard. So, Nate, do you want to throw the first question out to our panelists, or
Yeah, first question, I just wanted to allow everybody to kind of give an intro to like who they are, what they're doing, what they're working on, and kind of how their journey is progressing to esports and sports tech. Sandra, if you want to start.
Yeah, I can start. I think it's really interesting. First, glad to be here, and I think it's absolutely an exciting time in terms of the convergence of sports and technology. We at Intel often like to state that sports hasn't really changed for the past, over the 8 decades. I remember watching American football with my father, the big couch, big screen, and it's kind of a little bit the same with my daughter nowadays, albeit I would argue the last 5 years since we embarked on this journey, a pretty significant transformation in the world of sports, and then COVID-19 amplified it. I've had the fortunate opportunity to land myself in sports tech really from the interest of just technology growing up in Silicon Valley. I've been in tech for most of my life. Had the pleasure of leading our wearable efforts, which was related to human performance around the athletes. And I was asked by my leadership to really cross over into the world of immersive media, really to help the sports industry address the next generation of fans and how they consume content. I'm not sure my daughter will ever watch a full game of basketball or football. And they like to do Snap and TikTok. So we'll talk a little bit about how that's changing and what it means for the leagues and media rights holders. So looking forward to having the conversation with all of you.
Thank you.
Pass it out to Tim.
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Nate and Ash. And it's great to talk with a great panel here. So I'm a partner at Intersect VC, and most of our investments have really kind of fallen under, I guess, 3 main categories. So like CPG, direct to consumer companies, marketplaces and platforms, and B2B software. But we really like to work with some of the sports properties and esports properties that we've invested in, to work with our portfolio companies and just really find those creative ways to collaborate and just add more value, and just so excited to kind of talk a little bit more deeper about the space.
Right, cool. I think I'm next. This is Rohn, and I think I bring the international flavor to this panel because I'm in Berlin right now. I don't know if anybody else is outside of the US, but no, it's basically I co-founded a company called SportsTechX. What we do is we talk about what's happening in the sports tech ecosystem, and we do this from a global perspective. Like, we do a lot of deep content about what's happening in different parts of the world, what's happening in North America versus Europe versus Asia, how much investment has there been in sports tech startups over a 5-year period, what are the hottest trends in the ecosystem. And because we have this global perspective, I think when I say that I'm very bullish about what's happening in sports tech, and it's a very exciting time to be in this industry. I mean, our company's pretty young. We've only been around 3 years. And what started out as just kind of research for me personally of like, hey, let's look at what's happening in different markets. Suddenly that small idea turned into a company because it seemed like there were other people who were also interested in this information. That itself is is a good example of how interesting the space is and how it's growing really quickly. So yeah, we produce a lot of content about what's happening in the world. So excited to hear what the rest of the panel has to say about it as well.
Hey, and Ron, it's funny, man. Just from several years ago when we found out about SportsTechX, to your point, I mean, there's a lot of interest out there globally as to what these startups are doing across the entire ecosystem in sports and esports. And so it was a pleasure to be able connect with you guys through Stadia Ventures several years ago and kind of see the progression and the growth. Even the reports that you guys put out, and how you do a really deep dive, across the entire, global ecosystem of sports. And so, I'm just curious, is there, just from like your latest reports that came out, are there any interesting takeaways or trends that you're seeing, from that report that, our audience should be aware of?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about it from two perspectives. I think there are some global or macro trends which are relevant everywhere in the world, and which is actually, when we first started doing these reports 3 years ago, that was interesting for me to see, because like connected fitness or the fitness industry in general, that being so wide and diverse and it actually flourishing everywhere. Esports, of course, now it's passé, but it's not passé, it's super hot still, but just the fact that you talk about esports is, it's exciting everywhere. And content, the content industry, and how automated content and distribution and generation, there's so much around it. So we kind of talk about those as the three big trends, and a lot of development in each of those spaces, and there are sub-segments within each of those. But then there are unique trends which are specific to geographies. Like, for example, of course, in the US, you can't have a conversation without talking about betting and all the technology around that topic. In India, for example, you can't have a conversation without talking about fantasy sports, which is pretty close to betting, but that's specific to that geography. In Europe, it's something different. So there are some trends which are specific to the geographies that which are native to those regions, but there are the bigger ones, like I said, fitness, content, esports, and then there are more topical things. For example, I would hazard a guess, but if you, maybe in June of last year, you were suddenly to talk about SPACs, everybody would be looking at you like, hey, what is that really? And by the time October, November came out, it's like, who doesn't talk, who's not talking about it? And now again, maybe there's a trend that it's cooled off a bit since Feb, March. We haven't heard about those kind of launches. I mean, I think there was $15 billion that was invested in, or kind of sitting in SPACs in a period of 4 or 5 months, which is kind of insane when you think about it. So that happened, that went super hot. Then you have NFTs, which are beyond super hot. So I mean, there are a lot of things that we see as trends which pick up. The short term, I mean, I don't think NFTs is a short thing, but there are trends which we see move over a short period of time, or there are big trends which are across the globe. Like NFTs is a US specific thing. It'll pick up somewhere else. So fitness, content, esports is clearly global, and then there are specific ones which are hotter in specific regions.
But Ron, I would say on the NFT, I do think it's going to become global. I mean, we have our clubs overseas that they're all trying to figure this out, and I think this goes just back to, it's just a digital era, and you talk about the macro trends around technology and the metaverse and how, you know, this whole digital world is going to exist. And it's funny when everybody's like, is this just a fad? And we can't say it's a fad anymore. It's going to happen. And if you look at the evolution of technology, and you know, nobody really wanted to provide their credit cards online, and now you have your phone as your wallet. So if you can, and then technology's definitely being adopted at an accelerated rate, so that the whole NFT, the whole digital world is going to happen. And then the question is, as the sports industry is just playing catch up with some of the basic technology, how do you start to think about these emerging technologies and really establish what the future is going to be while being relevant for the present?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think sports can actually be a leader in the NFT space, and it's done a good job so far. And I think it'll continue to do. I agree that it's a global thing, and it's just a matter of time.
Hey, so in keeping the conversation talking about those trends, Sandra, I'm curious from Intel's perspective. I know you guys are doing like some really cool stuff with TrueView and different type of technology. Like, can you kind of speak on like some of the different initiatives or technology or trends that you're seeing that Intel is really going kind of leaning in on?
Yeah, I mean, I think the great thing from an Intel perspective is that we serve multiple industries. And what we have an opportunity is, if you look at things from a high level balcony, you start to see the macro trends, both on the consumer side, which applies to fans, and on the business side. So on the fan side, what was really interesting is that the next generation, they don't want to be told what to see, right? They're very independent. They want to be controlled. They want to create their own content. And so what we're seeing in the conversations that we're having with the sports industry is that, the 4 cameras that are on the field is no longer enough. Like, they don't want to have one perspective. And then as people have moved from like loyal to team, but loyal to athletes, they want to follow that particular athlete, and they want to have the perspective of how they broke down the play for a particular game. And so what we are seeing is that the fans, more so than ever, want highly interactive. They want to be content, creators, right? So user-generated content. They want to break down the play the way they see it. They want to be able to share it with others. And so you think about how leagues control the media. There's going to be a point in time where they're going to have to let the fans have a little bit more control. And that's going to be a good thing, because that's how they're going to engage the next generation of fans. And we often like to say is that this next generation, they all have kind of a little bit of ADD. They can pick and choose, right? They can pick and choose whatever content they want to see. So now it's the sports needs to fight for time. So we're seeing that from a fan perspective is highly interactive, highly personalized, and the ability to share and the ability to look at things from a very individualized perspective. And now you break it down on the operations side, like Rohn highlighted, like betting, fantasy. I mean, betting in the US, it's the thing that you all have to talk about. And with all of that comes, I think, the power of data. And so like, we're very fortunate. We have a platform called TrueView. Many people see it from the context of unlimited perspectives on the kind of broadcast digital side. But really what our platform is, I always like to use the analogy like the iPhone. When Steve Jobs announced the iPhone, it had a couple of services. It had your maps, but he never realized all the other services that could be generated from that platform. And similarly, with TrueView, our data can be used, whether it's for betting, fantasy, NFTs, coaching, officiating. There's so many endless opportunities, and I do think this is going to allow the sports industry to think more creative and kind of open their aperture and consider, how does data help me transform my business to continuously grow, as well as protect the athletes?
Yeah, if I could jump in real quick, yeah, I mean, just to piggyback on Sandra, like, yeah, I mean, I think, content, I think, is also shifting. A lot more stories are being told from like the athlete view, like as well, like more fans, like, as Sandra, mentioned, are gravitating towards individual athletes, want to like hear their stories, on and off, the fields. And I think that's super exciting. I think on the data side, I mean, I think now a lot of brands are really getting involved, with seeing more data, seeing the opportunities within certain sports, to get more involved when they haven't had the opportunity or kind of the awareness to get involved before.
So no, this is some great insight. And it's one of those things to where I agree, to Sandra's point, that these fans, they're definitely wanting to get different perspectives. And so, I guess from, for the viewers or our audience out here, what are some of those, things that you see, especially like Tim with Dapper Labs? Like, I know you guys are an investor in Dapper Labs. So can you kind of speak on like, the technology that Dapper Labs is leveraging or using for our audience who might not know, what Dapper Labs is or what they're about. Can you kind of speak on Dapper Labs, but then also, why or what was the rationale behind also, getting behind them financially from an investment standpoint?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think, for everybody that's familiar with Dapper Labs, they're the creator of CryptoKitties and NBA Top Shot. So, I think that, they're building, infrastructure here. I mean, they have the flow, part of the infrastructure and the tokens that kind of like power a lot of the underlying technology of Top Shot. And I think that this is really just the beginning of, NFTs as collectibles, but then also building upon that for, more utility around that. And, I think that, from the evolution and the first, CryptoKitties, and then kind of doing a lot of learnings from that, seeing how much, them building upon that in Ethereum, and then now building Flow, is just really exciting to know that there's going to be creating more, efficiency, and speed, in the NFT space, but then also now setting down that infrastructure and roadmap to build much more exciting things.
Now, I guess this is for Rohn. I guess what Tim kind of mentioned, and Sandra mentioned, that the consumer is kind of dictating what content is created, how it's consumed. And you have this platform where you do Hello Sports Tech, where you kind of demonstrate all these different products and services that are newly out there. How do you, I guess what I want to ask is kind of how do you see that content generation piece kind of developing across these different markets, whether it's Europe, Asia, or North America?
Content generation specifically?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for the plug, Nate. Yeah, Hello Sports Tech is another brand that we have. Always appreciate that. No, but just to give everybody else an idea, so with Hello Sports Tech, well, with SportsTechX, we're kind of in the B2B space primarily, right? We're talking to investors, to sports teams, to people such as yourself, about what is the cool new tech, who are these founders, what is the technology, and how does it get there. But with Hello Sports Tech, the idea is to take it to the consumer, because all of these companies in the end, they need to find that audience. They need to find validation through the end user. But that's just what Hello Sports Tech is about. With content generation specifically, I think there are many things. So first is what type of content are we talking about? Is it long form? Is it short form? What is the platform that it's meant to go out on? Who is the audience that it's speaking to? Suddenly you've seen a lot of companies go into content creation, which is about behind the scenes, starting from obviously the bigger streaming platforms. Just look at them, the number of shows that Netflix and Amazon Prime have suddenly put out, which is not at all just a season review kind of thing. It's actually going into the storytelling of what is going on behind the scenes with all these athletes. And that is why they're doing that is because fans want that. They want to go behind the game, behind the race, behind the field of play, and get into the personal stories of these athletes. That's why sites like Players Tribune, The Athletic, I mean, these are really powerful content generation engines, which really do tell the story behind just those 90 minutes, 2 hours, 3 hours of field of play, of the actual game. So that's on one side, but at the same time, there's the short form content where fans want content directly from the athletes, right? Which is why a lot of sports teams we see are investing in like automated content generation and distribution platforms where they can go easily from their training field, like the game we already know, but from the training field directly out to social media, where a fan can see a player just kicking a ball around with a couple of buddies, having a laugh, scoring a trick goal, things like that. So that's another thing that the audience wants. And then, of course, the stories from the athletes themselves, what brands they endorse, what do they eat, what do they wear, all that. So it's just this constant barrage of different types of content. And so it's difficult to pick like one trend? Is it only short form content? Does everybody want only small package stuff? No, there is an audience for long form content as well. There are people who watch 10 hours of an Amazon show. So, I mean, and there's big audiences for those shows as well. So, just depends. Like it seems like we're in an age where, yeah, there is an audience for everything. It's just that you have to decide how big is the audience that you're trying to reach.
And I had a follow-up for Sandra, kind of related to that media experience for fans. You guys recently announced a partnership with the Sacramento Kings for this immersive media experience. Would you be able to dive into a little bit about what that is and kind of also why the Kings were a good fit for that investment?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I mean, we look at partnerships in terms of, do they understand the vision, right? Do we have a unified point of view of, we're here to serve the fan and we're here to provide the fan many different services. And so the Kings, along with many other teams, are fantastic partners because they're closer to the fan than we are, right? So they bring the fan insight, whether they're going to the venue or not, or they're using their digital experience, and we bring the technical know-how. And our platform, and the reason why Intel's doing it, we always like to say, if it's easy, Intel will not do it. If it's hard, we're gonna do it. And it's because what we're doing is we're literally capturing the game, whether it's in the arena, on the court, or on the field, whether it's American football or soccer, real time. And then we are deconstructing and reconstructing in 3-dimensional spaces. So simply put, take a pixel and add a cube. And what the cube allows you to do is that you can have a fly-through camera from any perspective, right? And you can we always like to use the analogy, like imagine if you're Bumblebee and you want to see the play from Tom Brady's perspective and how he threw the ball and what he saw, you could do that. And oftentimes people think like, wait, was there a camera in his helmet? We're like, no, these are virtual cameras. And so what that enables you to do is, if we have the three-dimensional capture of the entire game, that means we've captured every single play. So even for the traditional broadcasters, like they'll never miss a play because we have it, right? If you want to break down one of your favorite plays and see it from 10 different perspectives or infinite perspectives, we're able to do that. And so we love our platform because it goes back to their earlier conversation, is that we're all individuals. Like this whole notion of mass media no longer exists. And when Rohn was just highlighting kind of the opportunity statement, albeit also the problem statement, is that everybody has their own way of wanting to consume the content and be entertained. And so now the content providers have to figure out how they're going to do that. How are they going to break it down from following a particular athlete when only very specific players get followed, right? That no longer works. How do you deliver highlights in near real time? And then, the other opportunities, some people are going to want to watch the entire game. And so we get excited because when we're asked when we have the conversations with the teams and the leagues, like, can you do that with your platform? And the answer is yes. It's once you have a 3-dimensional model of a game, there's so many things you can do with that. Coupled with also, like, we're very honored to leverage our platform to address the safety of the players, right? Without the athletes, there's no sport. And Intel's one of those companies that we're very committed to social responsibility, and the protection of athletes is one of the things. So thinking about what our platform can do in multiple ways is such an honor. And we were talking, I was laughing because as we're talking about trends, it hasn't come up, so I was like, we haven't brought it up, I gotta bring it up. Like OTT streaming, right? People used to say like it would never happen, people are not gonna watch sports in this little screen, and it has happened, right? It like accelerated to beat Disney's perspectives. Like it's just, the numbers are just, people are killing it. And it's because we live in a multi-device world. I mean, people talk about primary, secondary device. And I always tell people like, forget all that. That doesn't exist. We have multiple screens, some large, some small, and we're gonna consume content in many different ways. And that's just what our new reality is.
No, that's a great point, Sandra. And I mean, I couldn't agree. I mean, I think just when you're talking about just consuming, sports, and I mean, yeah, but like at this point, whether it's your iPad, your iPhone, whatever the case is, it doesn't matter. Like
eventually virtual screens are going to pop up. Literally, this is what's going to happen. It's going to be like the Matrix. Here you go. And it's happening. Look at the investments that company like Intel, like Facebooks and Apples of the world. I tell people, like, start spending time on what people are doubling down on, and you're going to start to see kind of what the future is going to become. And I think, obviously in Houston, and when you're looking at the power of technology, you've already seen it, how it disrupted all these other industries. It's sport, like such a massive opportunity in sports in terms of bringing technology to drive efficiencies in the stadiums, smart cities, the fan. There's just so much opportunity. Sometimes you're like, where do you want to begin? Like, where do you begin? Because there's so many opportunities that present itself.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And I think Tim, like, I know you guys are an investor in Triller, so kind of in regards to Sandra's point, being able to consume content in so many different ways. Like, can you kind of elaborate on Triller? And because I think that I think it was I can't remember what fight that was, but it was a fight of, I think it was a Mike Tyson fight or something like that. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Triller was like one of the sponsors. Personally, I didn't watch any content at the time on Triller until I was made aware, what Triller was. But can you kind of speak on that? Because to Sandra's point, like, we're all kind of consuming content in so many ways now. Thanks for that. I mean, Triller's been, what a wild ride, Triller has been over the last year or so, and I think, having an expedition of Tyson back in November, and just like how I don't know if you all kind of noticed, but it just took over social media. Like, just everybody was talking about it. I mean, I was just like scrolling like on Twitter. And just there were just so many comments. There's a lot of positive and some things that we had to work on as part of at Triller. But I think just really just everybody talking about the reach. I think was really amazing, and that's evolved into kind of now the Triller Fight Club, and had one a month ago, and then going to have a series of these, and it's really brought like new audiences, and kind of like rebooted kind of the boxing kind of like industry, and has really kind of flipped the model if you kind of look at what the numbers that have been published around kind of like traditional like pay-per-view, and then kind of like as we're talking about like watching on multiple screens, and mobile devices, and it's just like removing like a lot of like friction that used to be there. So I think that now that a lot of this content and media and being able to view things just very easily from an app, and not having to go through like multiple menus and screens and all that stuff, like makes it much more of a streamlined type of experience. So I think there's a lot of exciting things that Triller has kind of lined up, but I think it's really just continuing to bring together an audience that wants to see more of this type of content.
Yeah, actually, just to jump in on the point that was made, Nate, you talked about content generation. It almost seems like content distribution is the more important thing at this point, and how that reaches new audiences. Because I mean, kind of amazing stuff that Triller's doing on one side. You've also got, we talked about betting earlier, and how much broadcasters are jumping on the betting bandwagon, creating betting specific broadcasts. I mean, we've already seen ESPN do that. Fox will have something in that space. Then we've had broadcasts for a completely different audience. We saw the Nickelodeon and NFL partnership, which is clearly taking sports and gearing it to a specific audience. You've got a slime end zone kind of thing happening, and all sorts of animation and graphics for that. The NBA doing something with Marvel, which is again a different collaboration, bringing tech and onto the broadcasting channel. And then obviously you add OTT, and then the distribution game changes. So I think there's so much innovation happening even in those spaces. So content generation on one side, but content distribution also, there's a lot going on.
Nice. To kind of transition the conversation from like the current landscape of the ecosystem to the future and kind of what you all just kind of touched on, what technologies are you kind of most excited about exploring and utilizing for as either live events start to come back or they've already started to come back, especially with the Canelo fight here in Dallas where they had 70,000 people, or with these media platforms, kind of what excites you about what's to come in the future? Kind of what do you see on the horizon?
I can go. I mean, I think Nate, you highlighted, live events coming back, but I also want to remind people that not everybody can afford stuff. You can't afford to go. Somebody was just mentioning, they were talking about, I live near SF Giants and the cost for parking, the cost for tickets, and before you know it, it's already, plus $300, out of pocket. It's not something that everybody could afford. So since the economics is shifting, what I think is really important is the technologies that allow everybody to experience it as if they're almost in the venue, right? And also up close and personal. So not to just, be my own brand ambassador, but if I take TrueView and you can get up close and personal, couple that with the emerging, augmented reality and virtual reality, then anybody on the planet who could never imagine going to their favorite stadium, whether it's Fenway, whatever it may be, being able to see their athlete up close and personal and on the field I think is going to be transformative, and it gives everybody like equal opportunity, because we have to remember that there's also the affordability. And so from my perspective, I get excited about technologies that break down the economic divide and allow our next generation of kids that are such sports fanatics. I always think people like sports brings everybody together. And so how do we allow everybody to experience what other people experience in the arena, right? The sound, the noise, like if you think about the power of VR and what it's going to do, it's going to be transformative. And so I get excited about bringing fans closer to the game, especially those that will never have the opportunity to experience it.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, also, there's been a lot of like this acceleration of more technology to bring to go to where the fan is and where they want to go. So you'll see platforms like Cameo and others where you can kind of have those meet and greets, kind of like in this like kind of virtual world, and not having to the ability for until recently to have those in-game in stadium and in arena experiences. So I think we'll still kind of see a lot more of that, to kind of have that full level of affordability and accessibility. And I think that's also really great to kind of see that there's going to be a lot of variety mixed in there, so then you can do a lot of things or based on the time and capital needed.
Maybe I'll just go in a different direction, maybe just to add a different flavor. I'll talk about one thing that I've been really excited about, because we've spent a bit of time with it in the recent past, is exagaming, or certainly mixed reality exagaming. So this is talking about the fitness space, and connected fitness has been such a hot trend, especially during the pandemic. Everybody either has placed an order for a Peloton or has one in their house already, it seems like, or one of those devices. But no, so taking it to the next level is bringing mixed reality and augmented reality, adding the VR that Sandra was talking about, and actually being competitive in a social environment. Like, we got to try some of these devices. There's a company called Icarus in Munich, another one called Fun with Balls. Like, it's just super cool stuff. You put on a VR headset and you're flying through something, but you're not gaming. Your body is getting a full-on workout. I mean, I was on that device for about 30 minutes, and my core had a workout. I was sweating. It was the whole thing, and I totally got it. I was like, this could easily become a competitive league sport thing of its own. They already have, like, the companies are doing stuff on their own, but the Olympics has already announced that they're going to be doing virtual sports. So Zwift has a partnership at the Olympics. I think there's a sailing thing. There's something for motorsports. So, I mean, this combination of virtual sports with real world, where there's all this cool AR, VR tech layers, but then there's an actual full body workout, like your body is involved as well. like that could easily and probably very quickly will become a thing. Yeah, that was something that we just did recently on Hello Sports Tech, and I was like, yeah, I want some more of that.
No, I agree, Ron. And one of the things oftentimes when we talk about virtual reality, people talk about like the big headsets, and I remind people, remember how the computer started. It was a massive mainframe. Then we had desktops. Some of you guys were not born. Then we had laptops, and then we have this, right? And then technology changes. Definitely, the acceleration rate is much faster than back in the 70s and 80s. So you can only imagine that those headsets are going to be like glasses, and then eventually they're just going to be screens, these virtual screens that So for those people that don't believe in some of these emerging technologies, I'm like, it's just a matter, it's not if, it's just when, and let the technology adoption curve kind of play out, and let the ecosystem, the tech companies, like work with the hardware, work with the software to bring a frictionless experience to the industry.
Yeah, that's a great point, Sandra. And I think just when I think about just like football, for example, I think a lot of, coaches probably would have argued that there would be not a day in their coaching career where they would actually have their players wearing VR headsets and actually, learning from a playbook that's all in virtual reality. Like if you probably ask every coach, that's, I don't know, like been coaching for 20, 30 years, they'd be like, no way.
Yeah.
No way. What? Like no way. But to your point, it's the technology, it's changing at such a fast pace. And so absolutely, I can see these football players, basketball players, all athletes literally putting on these glasses that you can just wear every day.
Yeah.
And to where eventually, like you said, it will be a screen, VR, AR experience that they can just literally be experiencing all the different plays, right there in the coach's room, in the players room. And so, yeah, I mean, it's really exciting when you think about that and like what the future lies ahead. And so, this is really good stuff. And I want to kind of change up gears, switch gears, because I wanted to ask you, I know just with everything going on in, sports space, and especially like in esports, when you talk about diversity and, women, just being, at the table. Like I know that there's initiatives that Intel is working on, has already, started to actually, execute, where you have like women in sports tech, minorities in sports, to address like a lack of diversity and being able to have an even playing field. Can you kind of speak on that and like the things that Intel is doing, that you're doing as well too, to kind of address like those different issues in the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, it's such an honor. Back in 2015, our CEO at the time at the largest technology show in the world, which is Consumer Electronics Show, highlighted the importance of diversity and inclusion before it became the trendy topic with other corporations. So credit to Intel, the leadership role it plays. We put very hard metrics and we measure ourselves so that we know where we have gaps. And where we are learning and how do we share the best BKMs. But I have to tell you, that was macro intel, and joining the sports media industry, I always tell people it's like, I feel like I'm in a triple male world. It's always men. Yet, you know what? The females are the ones that are driving their kids to go play sports. I know that in the NFL, there's a large population of females that love American football. And we love to, celebrate it Sunday with the family. And so, and then you have, heard my daughter, she's 11, with her friends and some of her big basketball players. And they're like, Mom, like, why don't we ever see women's, NBA on TV, right? On the screen. And that's just wrong. And that's not acceptable. And so we have partnered with HTX Sports to ensure that in order to change, I'm a very big believer, it starts at the top. You need to have leadership people of all ethnicities and all genders at C-level, at board of director levels. And until that happens, it's going to be very difficult to change. So with HTX Sports, really looking at recruitment and making sure that we provide opportunities when we see job openings, ensuring that agencies who are of minority have an opportunity to respond to business opportunities. Women in sports and technologies, we got to fill the pipeline. Oftentimes we're like, well, we can't find enough, African Americans, we can't find Latinos, or we can't find women. I'm like, yeah, they're out there, but we're going to continue to, build the pipeline so that question never, gets asked. And so, and then minorities in sports. And so there are many different programs that we participate in because we believe it is, all the voices need to be heard. And if you think about how content is captured, right? It's always from a point of view of maybe a particular gender, but what about if you see it from a different perspective? And so, yes, the females do care about sports. And so changing that dynamic, it's going to take a long time. But we can see significant progress as long as our male allies engage and we have honest conversations. And we have seen progress over the past 2 years. We've seen women assistant coaches. We're seeing some changes in terms of the media production side of the house. So, let's celebrate those milestones, but also realize that's not enough. So I'm super eager to fast forward 20 years from now and see how the landscape has changed.
Yeah, no, so true. I mean, there's still a lot of work to be done. And, that's one of the reasons why, for us, Nate and I, just from, with HTX Sports Tech, that's what in Houston, we've been trying to, expose, these students at the college level, whether they're, women, Black and brown, expose them to different paths in the industry, having these mentoring programs, that they can actually learn, what does it take to be a general manager or, a CFO at a professional, sports organization. Because at the end of the day, if you don't know, you don't know. If you're not exposed, you just have no idea. And you think, all there is just, well, if I don't go to the NBA, then I can't be in sports. And so
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then it's interesting because they're like, oh, I'm interested in technology, but I'm more interested in sports. And then it becomes an either or. And I'm like, no, it's not an either or, it's an and. You can bring both of your passions together, and you don't have to be an engineer because you could be a really savvy business person and work with the NFL, negotiate business contracts, so there's so many, or you can represent an athlete and think about their social media and think about the world differently with Clubhouse. There's so much opportunity. And I think I always for the next generation, I'm just become your perpetual student. Keep on asking questions and do not be afraid to pick up the phone, not pick up the phone nowadays, but reach out via LinkedIn, and people are willing to help. You'd be more surprised. People will say, yes, happy to have a conversation with you.
Yeah, no, so true, so true. Hey, Tim, I know you guys are an investor in the Angel City. And so, I'm just curious, man, what, besides the brand look and feel being super awesome, and besides it, being just good for business to invest in women, what were some of the other things that you guys saw as far as a potential from an investment standpoint in Angel City? Because I think Sandra, she really mentioned a good point that, women are so influential in the household when it comes to, sports. And just speaking for myself, my wife is a coach's daughter. So sports, that's, in our house, that's always, up for discussion. And my wife is always, trying to find out what things that she can, purchase or whatever the case is that's sports related. So, Tim, can you kind of speak on, Angel City and why that was, something that, why that organization was an investment that really piqued you guys' interest?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, for everybody that may not be aware, Angel City is one of the new expansion teams for the women's soccer league in LA. And my journey and really being interested in women's sports has been a few decades now, but where I really started to learn a lot more about is I had made an investment in a new media company, around the female sports fans, and unfortunately that company wasn't able to kind of find that product market fit, but it's really stayed with me, over the last few years. And once I was able to connect with the great team now that's at Angel City, and had a lot of discussions about what the opportunity is kind of currently and where it could really go. It just was something that just seemed to be where I was very interested in, and wanted to participate. And I think that Ash, to your point, like the brand building has really started from day one. It's already kind of evolved over the last 6 months or so, and then now has a lot of momentum kind of going into when we're going to be able to participate in the expansion draft at the end of the year, and then we don't take the field until next year in 22. But I think it's really just continuing to open up the opportunities like we're talking about here in women's sports, from the athletes, from those that are in the front office, those that are working operations, those that are working on game day. I mean, we have I think we're up to 5 supporter groups now that have mostly been organic. And it's just amazing to see the reception, not only in the LA area, but even, around the country and even internationally. I've even had a lot of, great conversations just with people, in other countries, and say that, they're talking about Angel City. So, I think it's a really great, momentum, but also movement, to continue to enhance what's already happening and supporting women and women's sports. And even at Intersect VC, I mean, we've invested in more than half our companies are in women founded companies. So it's something that's been really long-standing for us to continue to support, and we just can't be more excited about what the future brings.
Nice. There's a quote that Fred Taylor uses on I Am Athlete: exposure leads to expansion. And this is related to Rohn, and kind of what Sandra mentioned, like the exposure and kind of creating an awareness of there's opportunities within entrepreneurship, within investment for women, for minorities. Are you seeing, or have you started to see any shift or focus on incubators, accelerators, VC firms targeting women or minorities to get more into that sports tech entrepreneurship or esports side of things?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's without question. You're seeing every fund wants, as Tim just said, every fund talks about it that way. They want to be conscious of what is the mix of founders that they're helping. I think there are funds mainly in the US. I can't say I've seen too many in Europe, but there are funds which are exclusively for minorities. There are funds exclusively to support women founders, and usually those kind, in my experience at least so far that I've seen, they're not specifically for sports tech. They're for minority founders across the board. But yeah, I think sports tech funds, or especially accelerator programs, if there are women found teams, they do get exposure. So yeah, it's a trend that we're seeing increasingly, and yeah, hope it continues. I'm fairly sure that it will.
We will make sure it continues, Rohn.
Yeah,
yes, because it needs
to do our part.
It really needs to. I mean, it is something that I think that everyone recognizes that there's definitely a need for it to change, and so it's just a matter of just folks working together and collaborating. And so before we wrap things up, I definitely want to ask, from your perspective, Sandra, and then we can ping pong it to Tim and Rohn afterwards. But I wanted to ask you, Sandra, like, just from Intel's perspective, what do you think are some of the things that you've seen out, in across the country, that are, things that Houston can kind of learn and take away in order to become a sports tech hub? Because I think that we've seen, for example, Indianapolis, for example, you have the Pacers, you have the Tech Stars, all of these, corporations and accelerators working together to kind of create, this ecosystem. But from your perspective, what do you think, are those kind of takeaways that Houston can listen to in regards to trying to create this hub?
Right. I mean, I think the first question is, who does Houston want to become? Does Houston, with opportunity, like there's a lot of cities that have aspired to become Silicon Valley and have actually, whether it's in Miami, whether it's in Atlanta, and have challenged, the Valley. And now with COVID, everybody could be dispersed. And so I would say the challenge is that Houston can become a leading hub in sports and technology, akin to how they're leading in oil and gas, right? You have a bunch of sports teams, and you have a lot of probably smart technologists as well. And if they're not in your hometown, they're only a phone call away, right? I mean, most tech industries and VCs, we're all accessible. And I think it's really important to reflect back, and I would impart this knowledge, is that, pay attention to market trends. Like, there was a lot of industries that have hurt themselves because they were playing catch up, and really believe it's going to happen. Like the whole NFT conversation, it's not a fad. It is real. The metaverse is real. Pay attention to that. Figure out how you're going to support your citizens in that effort and your businesses, and learn how to create an infrastructure so you can be ready for the future, right? So that you can become the next iconic place that people admire. And that's what I would say is that, if I look at, cities or states and what they've aspired to, right? They've really wanted, like, we want to become the next Silicon Valley. And they did everything together, working with private, public, and made it happen, and definitely put a dent into Silicon Valley. So if there's a will, there's always a way. And then the question is really, who do they want to be? Who does Houston want to become? And I'm sure with both you guys are going to help them kind of find the answer to that.
That's exactly what we're trying. That's exactly what we're trying to do.
Yep, and we're here. Look, when we have presence everywhere. So Intel's happy to support and help in any way that we can.
Yes, and we appreciate it. All right.
I could jump in. Yeah, I mean, I think Ash, like you said, like Techstars Sports and Indy. I think that, I honestly haven't spent that much time in Indianapolis, but, I think, being a mentor, there at Techstars Sports, I just didn't, appreciate, how big it was a sports town until I kind of was on the ground there and spent some time there. So, and I think the same thing with a lot of commonality with Stadia Ventures and what they've done in Frisco, Texas and St. Louis. I mean, take a lot of lessons from those things. I think spending a little time there in Houston during Super Bowl week, I think there's a lot of potential there, and that was a few years ago, and I'm sure it's only gained momentum. So yeah, I think play to the strengths that are already embedded there, but sports tech is an emerging area, but really what the commonality with things around sports business is it really encompasses like all the different sectors and industries. So what large applications that have worked with like oil and gas could be applied to sports tech. I mean, that's a good, interesting starting point, and then see where it kind of grows from there.
Just to maybe finish that point, I guess from my perspective, let me say it this way. I think really thriving, successful startups or sports tech hubs, we've seen have three primary good drivers: a really good supply of good quality startups, a good bunch of investors who are willing to put a bit of bucks behind it, and 3, the supporting cast, which is the supporting cast or the supporting initiatives, which really give depth to the ecosystem. These are the accelerators, the initiatives, whether it's by sports teams, whether it's by enthusiastic guys such as yourselves, somebody who the ecosystem can come together on. Now, the startups are usually around. There's startups everywhere. And investors will follow wherever there are quality startups. And money will come as well. The initiatives, the supporting cast, which is what holds the whole ecosystem together, that's what a city needs. And the other cities that you mentioned, you talked about 1 each. It's not like there are 20. There's 1 Indy, there's 1 Frisco. There are some cities which have a lot, but most cities just have 1 or 2. That's all it needs. It just needs one. One initiative which brings all the sports teams together, brings all the key players in the local ecosystem, brings the companies like Intel on board, brings the investors on board, and puts them in front of these startups and say, hey guys, meet. That's all it takes. It takes 1, and hopefully you guys will be the one for Houston.
Cool, appreciate that. Just to close it out, I wanted to give everybody a chance to kind of let everybody know where they can find you or connect with you, and or if you want to share anything that you're working on with your respective companies.
I can go. You can find me on LinkedIn. Happy to follow up accordingly. And as the seasons are kicking off, there's some exciting things that we have planned with our league partners. So stay tuned and keep track of Intel Sports and True.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, for me, same. You can find me on LinkedIn. It's just really like, for me at Intersect, we really just like to invest in, great founders. We're sector agnostic, but we, like to utilize, what we've done in sports just to, help our portfolio companies.
Nice. Yeah, Rohn Malhotra, again, find me on LinkedIn like the others, but never miss a chance at a plug. So I'm going to talk about another thing that we're doing. So SportsTechX is around. That's our B2B side. Hello, Sports Tech. Thanks, Nate. You helped me talk about that a bit. And the third thing that we've just kind of launched, because NFTs is such a big hot space and there's so much action happening, we've launched a property called Nifty Sports, niftysports.co, which is right now is just a simple newsletter, which will tell you whenever there are new drops, what are the new NFTs coming out in sports, on which platforms, who's doing well and who not so much. At least there's one place where you can filter through that noise, so you can come check that one out as well.
Cool, appreciate it. For myself, I wanted to thank everybody for their time to get together and have this conversation. Ash, any other closing thoughts from you?
Yeah, hey, so y'all, we really appreciate the time, and thank you so much for sharing those insights, some takeaways, best practices, just all of the insights that you guys share. We are very grateful for that, and thank you for the time. We look forward to staying connected with you guys and definitely working with y'all. So appreciate it, and till next time.